Okay, so we are working through the Kaplan book. It is the best book. These videos are not meant to replace them at all. It's supposed to be just, if you're working on this book, these are the areas I'm talking about. Of their practice test, these are the areas or subjects that those questions hit on. I'm not trying to give you the answers to the practice test because that makes the practice test a waste of time. But I'm just using this as a, this is what the subject is about, etc. And there's going to be some miss. So this is question 1. It's about interest. If it's got green behind it, that means the formula sheet that they give us to take the test, that there is information on this formula sheet that can help you a lot. So we want to look at that real quick just to get a good visual. 46 questions, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 questions out of 46. So almost 1/4 of the practice test, there's information on the formula sheet that they give us that helps us a great deal. So we're going to talk about interest and how to handle interest questions. On this practice test, interest showed up, I believe, twice. So 2 out of 46 questions is this subject. Definitely worth knowing. The math isn't that hard. So we're going to pause and start teaching in a second. So again, this is meant to be just a side companion piece to the Kaplan book. And the area we're talking about is Unit 2, Lesson 5, under the Math Reasoning section. Page 272, they do a great job of teaching simple interest for the kind of questions that we're going to show up. So that's the location. So if you have the book, that's the page we're at. And we can go here. So 2 of the things they give you on the test. One is the math, not that, this. They give us a formula sheet, which we want to look at this and be not overwhelmed. We want to be comfortable, okay? Because this looks like a bunch of random typos here. But if we go to simple interest, right here, it says I equals PRT. And they tell, it's one of the few times you see it right here. They don't tell us what all these letters mean, but on the interest questions they do. And it kind of helps. So if we look at this, I is equals interest, P is principal, R is rate, and T is time, which is nice that they do this for us. Also, this is the calculator they give us. It is very powerful, but again, it can be overwhelming to look at some of these buttons and think that's a lot. We don't have to know all of them. We could get to know half of them really, really well, and feel very comfortable with having these 2 things. We want to use them. We want to use them, so we want to know our way around them. So questions they can ask about interest. This is the core of the question. Interest is about money that moves from either a bank to a person or a person to a financial institution or one person to another, whatever. Money moves and then it sits or it's used. And it's either borrowed or invested. So there's either going to be questions about somebody borrowing money to buy a giraffe or whatever, who knows, or money that's invested that sits and gains interest in the bank or whatever. Either way, it's the same story. Money moves and money costs money. So in this story, Andy, going with the office here, Andy borrows that much money from Dwight. That's the rate, and that's how many years. Now there's 2 questions at least 2 questions that the GED will ask off that. Either how much is the interest of the loan? In other words, how much money do they have, will the loan cost them? Because borrowing money costs money. Or the total, how much is he going to pay back? Now the formula they give us in the formula sheet, and it's the best formula, it's really the only formula they use. is I equals PRT. And that's some sloppy writing. This is going to tell us how much did the money cost. And then PRT, we're going to solve right now here in a second. P is the money. R is the rate of the interest. And T is the time in years. And it's always meant to be in years. So if they changed 4 years to 18 months, which is what the GED can do, because they're really good at adding a little extra pressure to a question, we would have to know it's got to go back to years. So if they said 18 months and there's 12 months in a year, we would have to go, wait. That's 1.5 years. So letters next to each other like this mean multiply. There's an invisible little times dot in those things that let us know, change that to the money, change that to the rate, change that to the time, multiply them all together. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave the story up here. Go back to the questions and erase. Oh, we can't erase that. All right. So here we go. I is interest. That's what we're trying to figure out. The cost of the loan. PRT. P is the money. So we just plug in how much money moves. Times the rate. And the rate is the percentage. Now, percentage, that little symbol is a picture. Percent is Latin for out of 100. So for every $100 he borrows, he has to pay 5 to borrow the 100. So that means 5 out of 100. So if we put that into a fraction, 5% is the same thing as this. Because this is a 1 and that's 2 zeros right there. So the percent sign is actually a picture of 100. And if we needed to change it to a decimal, which is what we would need to do, all we do is there's a little decimal point right there, an invisible one. We bounce this way twice. So I put my decimal point right there. We move back, we got to create a 0 there. So what it comes out to being is 0.05. And a wise man said, when it comes to decimals, just think about money. So 5% is really 5 cents. So we just bounced this thing over twice. And now we have our decimal. You stay. There we go. So we go times 0.05. And then time is always in years. So then it's 0.4. If we type this into a calculator, we're going to get the interest. It's that straightforward. If we type all this into a calculator, it's going to give us exactly what we want. So if we glance over our calculator real quick, stop the share, we go over here. Okay, so if we feel iffy on a calculator, it was $1,400. So we would just type in 1,400. So 1,400 would show up right here. Then we hit the times button. PRT in algebra, letters next to each other, anything that touches tends to multiply. So we'd hit that and there'd be a little times thing that shows up. We converted our rate to a decimal. So it'd be times, and here's the decimal for that right there. We'd hit 0.05. Times, and then the loan was 4 years. And then we just hit 4. Now this calculator does not have an equal sign. A lot of calculators do. This one doesn't. We hit enter. So I'm going to use my calculator real quick. So 1400 times 0.05 times 4 equals 280. That's the number we get. Now, this is where it's important. GED does not write questions the way a worksheet does. GED writes questions forwards, backwards, side window, coming in through the roof, in through the basement. They attack it at any different angle. Always read the last sentence of the question. I've told people when you take a test, I told my son when he took a standardized test, I gave him my wedding ring and said, wear this. And that way you're consciously thinking of something. And I said, all this is to remind you is A, I love you, and B, read the last sentence. Because when I go back to that, 1 second, when we go back to the question, they could either ask, how much is the interest? They could ask that, like, how much does this loan cost them? And that answer would be 280, which would be cool. But if they asked the question, how much money he pays back in total, well, he's not going to pay 280. He's not going to borrow $1,400 and then owe Dwight $280. That's crazy. Dwight's losing money off that, and his job is to make money because money costs money. So if they do that, if they say the word total, you're getting the idea that they want something else besides just the interest, then we have to be smart enough to just go, okay, he's going to pay back the $1,400, but he also has to pay back over time $280. So we're going to answer that together and put these together. So how much does he pay back total? If they're saying total, add them together. If they're saying just the interest, give the interest. But this is the crucial part. The guts of the question are up here. The reality of the question is down here. That last sentence, so read them together and read them carefully. On page 272 of the Kaplan book, I'm just reading the last sentences, okay? So I'm just gonna read them. What is the total amount he pays back in 9 months? How much interest is blah, blah, blah. So one was total, one was interest. We got to know what they're asking. I believe it doesn't care what's on the practice test, but this is one segment that could show up twice, definitely once out of 46 questions, where this is the curveball. So I'm going to clear all this out, and we're going to say what's the important thing about answering questions. First, we got to recognize that it is an interest question. And formula sheet the rules. Next, we've got to plug in the info correctly. 2 quick things on the curveball. They could say 5.5%. Let's say they said that something happened and it's 5.5%. The reminder is that there's 2 decimal places, 2 zeros. So it doesn't matter that there's, we don't bump this once and think 55 cents. It's 5.5 cents. So we got to bounce it twice over here, make a dot, put in a 0 in the empty spot. Let me get rid of this. Not that. Let me get rid of this. Boop. And this. So the number then would be 0.055, which would be 5 cents and then 1/2 cent later on. So bounce it twice. Do that carefully. The second curveball is that the time is always in years, and they could give us months. So if I'm not doing that. Anyway, whatever. If they said, like the example in the book, said 9 months, and the time is always in years, and this is, you can make fun of my handwriting all you want. That's 9 out of 12. This is a calculator question. And here I went with a fraction, stuff that everybody hates. If you ever want to know how to change a decimal or get a decimal out of a fraction, remember that a fraction is just a picture of a division sign. That's all it is. And the division sign is just a picture of a fraction. I wish they told us that. It's a line with something on top and something on the bottom. Type it into your calculator top down. So 9 divided by 12, 0.75. That's what the time would be. So once they go to months, like if they did a question about 18 months, and we're like, you know, we're frazzled or whatever, you're supposed to be tired. If they said 18 months, put 18 over 12 and divide down. And then you get 1.5. Once you do that, multiply them together and you're in great shape. Then read the final sentence. Why am I doubting? Because that's the only thing that matters. In GED is likely, it's possible that they could ask the total, and then like on the question we just did, if the interest was 280, but they're asking for the total, they will sometimes put the wrong answer as one of the choices, which is just dirty business. So it's one of those things where you do the math, you apply the formula, you do everything right, you get an answer, you look at your calculator, and that's B. And you're like, well, then it has to be it because my calculator says so. We want to recognize that the GED's job is to double over, make sure. Do we really, really know what we're doing? So there always, almost always, will be the correct answer and the distracting answer. And then two other that probably don't fit very well. The distracting answer is something we have to be careful for, where they purposely put something in there that's incomplete and scary. So on 273 in the Kaplan book, go through those questions. 272 has the explanation and it's very good. They obviously do a great job. But this is the curveballs that can be planted into there. Months instead of years, decimals for the percent sign that make us question. No, always just bounce over 2 spots. No matter how, if it's a decimal of a percent, they can do that. Just bounce that thing over 2 spots and then read that final question.